So I know recently I've been sort of slacking on my closest clone monthly videos that I do typically every month, where I give you all a list of clones that are at least within about 90% close to the original or above. But today I definitely have a new one of those videos for you all for the month of December. So if you're interested to see what clones I have here that are on this list, then definitely stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's Jamar from Vegas Sense. And if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And to anyone watching, do me a favor, go ahead and leave a like and a comment on the video, all right? So just to start with the video here, I have Milano Prive, and this is gonna be from Pandora Sense. It's pretty much Paris Corner, I believe. And this is their take on 1 million Prive from Paco Rabanne. So that is a discontinued fragrance, pretty well sought after. And right now, I know that fragrance goes for crazy prices, you know, hundreds of dollars for a fragrance that you used to, you know, a few years ago be able to, you know, get for probably around $60 or so for a 100 ml bottle. So, I mean, those are pretty crazy prices for a designer fragrance. It is a very nice smelling fragrance, but at the same time, I don't think it's worth $200–300. So this fragrance pretty much gets you, I would say, about 95%, you know, close to the original fragrance. It gives you this sort of, you know, bubblegum sweet, sort of, you know, fruity mandarin orange note, mixed with cinnamon and tobacco. So this is a very, very nice sort of masculine scent. It is sort of on the playful side as well, so it's not like a super mature type of scent. But this, again, like I said, it comes about 95% close to the original. And I believe you can pick this up for about $30 on Aroma Concept. So it's a pretty cheap fragrance as well. Definitely check this one out if you're looking for 1 million Prive, or if you're looking for some sort of replacement of that fragrance. This is going to give you the exact same, you know, experience in my opinion. So again, this is Milano Prive by Pandora Sense. Next one up, this is going to be from the house of Lattafa, and this is going to be their take on the Instant Crush scent DNA from Mancera, and this is going to be Afkaar. All right. So this fragrance, overall, I would say this is at least about probably 95% close as well to Mancera's Instant Crush. Really, the main difference that I get from this is it has a slightly higher, I would say, emphasis on the mandarin orange note in the opening of the fragrance. So it gives it a slightly sort of, you know, more fruity take on the scent profile. Which I would say that I prefer the way that this smells over the original. But outside of that, especially, you know, once the two fragrances dry down, they're essentially the same thing pretty much. And also the performance on this is just as good, you know, as the Mancera, if not slightly better when it comes to like the projection. All right. So definitely, if you're a fan of Mancera's Instant Crush, and, you know, maybe you want to be able to find it for a little bit cheaper, I would say absolutely take a look at this one. I believe you can typically find this on the Oud store for about $45 or so, anywhere from about $35 to $45. I know the price kind of fluctuates a little bit, but for $35 to $45 for this 100 ml bottle, it's absolutely worth it. And again, this is going to be Afkaar from Lattafa. All right, so from the house of Fragrance World, we have a clone of Carolina Herrera's Goldmer Absolute, and this is Absolute Gold. So this fragrance, this is pretty much just like a sort of earthy green, but sort of chocolatey and slightly sort of spicy type of fragrance. In my opinion, it is pretty unisex, but it does, I would say, probably lean slightly feminine. But either way, I would say this is a really, really sort of addictive, sexy type of, you know, close to your skin scent. And this comes at least, I would say, about 95% close to the original. There is a slight sort of difference in the opening. I would say you get a little bit more of the sort of immortelle and licorice notes in the opening of this one than what you do in the original fragrance. But just in terms of like the overall quality, I would say this pretty much, it smells of the same sort of quality as the original fragrance for the most part. And then also, I mean, in terms of the performance, it pretty much, it gives you about the same sort of performance that you get with the original. Again, this is not going to be a super, you know, like heavy projecting sort of scent. This is going to be a sort of scent bubble around you, maybe about 2 feet max. But, you know, overall longevity is pretty good on this one. This is going to be at least an 8 to 10 hour fragrance on skin and clothes. So overall, man, I really, really love this one. And again, it's going to be about a 95%, I would say, you know, close clone to the original fragrance. All right. So definitely check this one out. The original fragrance is discontinued. So I would say if you're familiar with, you know, the original scent profile and you're looking for an alternative, absolutely pick this one up. And this, again, is going to be absolute gold by Fragrance World. All right, so the next fragrance, this is also going to be from the house of Fragrance World, and this is going to be their take on Tom Ford's Oud Wood, and this is going to be Oud Wonder. All right, Oud Wonder. So I know most people, they're probably more familiar with, I believe it's called Woody Oud from Maison Alhambra. One thing that I've sort of noticed whenever there's like you know, a clone of a certain line of fragrances from a certain sort of, you know, original fragrance house, if Maison Alhambra and Fragrance World both have like their own versions of those fragrances, typically what I notice is Maison Alhambra versions of those fragrances, they're normally a little bit louder projecting, but in terms of like the quality of the smell, I would say that they're normally not as well blended as what the Fragrance World versions are. The Fragrance World versions, at least in my opinion, seem to be slightly better blended. But as a result of that, they tend to not project as loudly or come off as harsh as what some of the Maison Alhambras seem to do in some cases. So that's just something that I've sort of noticed. You know, maybe for you, you don't really get that. But that is something that I've noticed when kind of smelling, you know, fragrances back and forth between the Maison Alhambras and the Fragrance World fragrances. So this fragrance, I would say, is about like 90% close to Tom Ford's Oud Wood. The main difference that I got in this fragrance was, at least in the opening, there is a higher emphasis, in my opinion, on that sort of cardamom note, which, I mean, that could be intentional. I think in a lot of cases with some of these, you know, fragrance clone houses, they do tend to add their own sort of touch on the fragrances to maybe make the fragrances lean more so in a certain direction. I do think that that added sort of cardamom emphasis in this one makes a fragrance that was already, in my opinion, a pretty masculine leaning scent. I think it makes it even more masculine with that sort of added cardamom note. All right. So definitely, man, this is a solid fragrance. The performance on this one right now, I would say, is about 6 to 7 hours or so. And then in terms of like the projection, it's not like a super projecting scent. It is a pretty, you know, it is a more sort of closer to your skin type of scent, but I would say so is the original pretty much. All right. So definitely check this one out if you like Tom Ford's Oud Wood. And again, this is going to be Oud Wonder from Fragrance World. All right, so the next fragrance is also going to be from Fragrance World as well. This is their take on Parfums de Marly's Hautaine, and this is Hartnell from Fragrance World. All right. So Hartnell, at least to my nose, I would say this is about a 90% close clone, especially like once you start to get into like the dry down of the fragrance. Now in the opening, there are some slight sort of differences. I would say that there's definitely a heavier emphasis in this fragrance on the saffron note for sure. And I would say there's less of an emphasis on the sort of herbal notes that you get within the top of Haultain. Pretty much once the two start to dry down, they are, I would say, you know, again, at least about 90% close to each other. This one, though, I would say the praline note in this is slightly more sweeter than what you get with Haultain. And like I said, it's just, it doesn't have as much of a sort of herbal feel to it, you know, that the original from Parfums de Marly has. Actually, I do prefer the way that this smells over Haultain. But, you know, again, overall, I would say if we're talking about, you know, closeness of, you know, scent, pretty much, this does come about 90% close to Haultain, in my opinion. All right. So definitely check this one out, man. If you, I would say, are curious to know what Haultain smells like, this pretty much gives you about the same experience. Like I said, Haultain is just a little bit more sort of on the herbal side, in my opinion. But for the most part, I mean, the performance on this is pretty good. And it pretty much, it gives you, I would say, about the same experience that you get from the Parfums de Marly. All right. So again, Fragrance World Hartnell. All right, and then the last fragrance on this list, I would say, is my favorite for sure. This is Fragrance World's take on Mystery Tobacco from Carolina Herrera. This is gonna be Tobacco Myth. All right, so this is much smoother, I would say, in terms of the blend quality and just, you know, the overall just quality of scent. This is much better, in my opinion, than the Maison Alhambra Exclusive Tobacco. Exclusive Tobacco is still a very good fragrance. It is definitely louder than what this is, and even the original Mystery Tobacco. But as a result of that extra sort of push that you get from that fragrance, if you smell the Exclusive Tobacco side by side with either this or the original from Carolina Herrera, you can definitely tell that, you know, there is a quality difference. The Maison Alhambra does come off as being a little bit more on the screechier side and more loud and abrasive. Whereas this one, man, it's not as smooth as what the original is from Maison Alhambra, or I'm sorry, from Carolina Herrera. But this is definitely a really, I would say, smoothly blended fragrance. It does come, I would say, about 90% or so close to the original. I would say the main difference that I kind of get with this one is, at least in the opening, I would say there's a slightly heavier emphasis on tobacco, or at least tobacco is a note that sticks out more than the other notes in this fragrance. Whereas with the Carolina Herrera, I would say you really don't get any sort of note sticking out more than, you know, the other notes. You pretty much, you get a really nice blend of, you know, all of the sort of top notes in that fragrance, like the ginger, the citruses, the artemisia, the tobacco, the patchouli. You get all of those sort of, you know, kind of blended together as one, more so in the Carolina Herrera than what you do in the Tobacco Myth. All right. So either way, man, I would say this is definitely my favorite tobacco forward sort of scent. I would say absolutely, I do prefer this over Afkaar by Oud Wonder. I prefer this over Tobacco from Maison Alhambra. I'm trying to think of some other scents that I have that have tobacco in them, but this, I would say, is probably my favorite. Maybe I would probably put Alexandria's 1981X over this fragrance. But, you know, if not, I would say those two are pretty much neck and neck, pretty much. So if you are familiar with that sort of scent profile of Mystery Tobacco, Parfums de Marly's Carlisle, or Mancera's Red Tobacco, and, you know, you've smelled clones of all those fragrances, and maybe you're looking to just only have one, I would say this is definitely the one that I would choose anyway. All right. So again, this one is going to be Tobacco Myth by Fragrance World. So let me know what you all thought about that list. You know, again, these fragrances, in my opinion, are at least about 90% close to the originals. And I really enjoy all of these fragrances, especially for this time of the year. All right. So let me know what you all thought of the list in the comments below. Do you all agree with my assessment of how close these come to the original? And again, if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And once again, that's Jamar from Vegas Scents. I'll see you on the next video.